Wingspan, 5 feet. Beak, 5 to 5.5 inches fully grown. One of the largest birds in Europe and one of the best-known water birds in the world. Weighs in at only 4 pounds, height 3 feet. The grey heron. And this is the story of one of them. Not this one. That was just to make sure we all know what we're talking about. That easily recognized silhouette, the bird likely to turn up in the wildest marsh or the tamest pond. The grey heron. It's cold, still winter, but a female heron, after months of lonely hunting, must go back to the ancestral home and find a mate. She calls. The male reacts. The male heron has also spent the winter alone, but has now picked himself a nesting territory from which to attract a female. This display is called bitterning, after that other marsh bird, the bittern. Herons are colonial nesters, so the female has several choices. They aren't overreacting to the Sex Equality Act. It's always been that way. And they choose the one that attracts them most. The choice made, the female's sudden approach evokes the more aggressive bow snap display. This would serve to ward off a male intruder if by any chance he'd made a mistake about the sex. Easy to do, even if you're a heron. But once accepted, the pair is formed and family life begins. Our story is about one heron called, forgive us, Big Bill. This is his mum and dad. Rooks are tolerated in a heronry, but it has been known for rooks and herons to fight to the death over the available space. A typical heronry would be a stand of trees close to water, and it might have been in use for hundreds of years. Dad goes, Mum stays. The brightness of her bill shows she's ready for mating. Dad might have gone to something called the standing ground, a sort of non-working men's club, leaving all this beauty behind. But the communal nature of the gatherings is said to stimulate the reproductive condition. So, don't worry, love. He'll be back. Dad didn't go to the standing ground. He went to the nearby fishing. Sneaked out for a quick one, sort of thing. Coot and teal. Herons, in spite of their eagerness to breed, are often interrupted by, say, severe frost, and a protracted spell of bad weather can affect the timing of events. If there are delays of up to 3 weeks, it can mean the young are in the nest until early September. And the concentration of herons near the heronry leads to great competition over food, especially if it's scarce. This heron has a fish, and like all herons, wants to eat it alone. But the other herons have other ideas. When food is scarce, coot and moorhen, even duck like teal and mallard, have been killed and eaten, though the heron sometimes chokes to death in the attempt. Dad hesitates, and so someone else gets the dropped fish. It is, as it so often is, a fight to survive. Herons are well adapted for life in a watery environment with their long neck and long legs. They have semi-binocular vision, whatever that is. The position of the eyes giving them the advantage of stereoscopic sight, and this meets the heron's requirements perfectly. It's even been suggested that the broken pattern of black and white feathers helps hide them from the fish. Good afternoon. Sir? Herons are like all fishermen. They prefer big fish. As soon as conditions improve, breeding can continue and building a nest is the first job. Both birds help with the building. As a general rule, the male collects the material and the female puts it together. However, here the female is collecting, so it's just possible Big Bill's father is a bit of a layabout. There's no shortage of nest material, as herons will take sticks and twigs from any old tree around, or someone else's nest. Big sticks of dead wood form the foundation, and thin, whippy twigs finish the nest off. It's lined with hair, feathers, rootlets, twigs, but herons can be great improvisers. One nest was found made entirely out of wire. Here's Dad, doing his bit. The heron's spindly anatomy has inspired some odd bits of folklore. For example, they say herons build a nest with 2 holes in the bottom, so they can sit with their legs dangling through. It's probably not true. When Dad arrives with his stick, there's a gentle moment of offering and acceptance. And the stick is added to the nest. The female spends the night roosting at the chosen nest site, and the male joins her at dawn, when nest building and mating take place. Not a lot of preliminaries to the latter. A sort of avian version of jumping from the mantelpiece. That's that, then. Now, what did you say your name was? A few days after copulation, the first egg is laid, followed by one every 2 days. Once the first egg's laid, the bill reverts to its normal yellow color. But if the clutch is lost, the bill becomes pinkish and the birds display and mate again. This makes the heron's breeding season one of the longest of all British birds. A clutch is usually 3 to 5 eggs, but it can be as many as 10. You know what some people are like. And incubation starts with the laying of the first or second egg. This means the young will be different ages when they hatch. Very important to herons, that is. Nests are sometimes used season after season and become a sort of tower block of subletting. Starlings and sparrows occupy the lower flats, with the herons, quite rightly, in the penthouse. Nests can weigh as much as half a hundredweight and measure 4 feet across. Some indeed can be so heavy they crash to the ground. Incubation is shared, the changeover, or nest relief, being a time of great excitement and mutual display, which strengthens the pair bond. They let out a long cry on changeover, and the relieving partner sometimes brings a ceremonial offering. The stints vary from 6 to 12 hours, the job being shared equally during the 25-day incubation. The male prefers the day shift, for some reason. first eggs will hatch at the end of March, and most pairs will have young by early April. This is Dad, standing guard. For the first 10 days, the young are helpless. One or other of the adults will be on constant guard. When all the young here have hatched, there will be a difference of 6 days in the ages. The oldest is our Big Bill. Dominant, assertive, he uses his superior strength and weight to get more food. As they say, a good big 'un will always beat a good little 'un. If there's a shortage of food, the youngest just can't compete. Herons need privacy. They're very sensitive to disturbance. This can often lead to desertion, but can also be the cause of nests being left temporarily exposed to predators such as crows and jackdaws. More advanced young can be frightened away from a nest, and if they can't get back to it, they starve, as the parents will bring food only to the nest itself. They may even fall to the ground. And it's the disturbance of large young, just before they become competent flyers, that can cause serious mortality. Still, whatever man's influence, direct or indirect, losses from natural causes are much higher. Gales can be killers. For a growing family, this is not ours, by the way, the risks are enormous. The oldest young are again in the greatest danger, especially if they're stretching their wings. Again, it's only necessary for a young bird to be blown a few feet away from the nest. If it doesn't get back, it starves. If it falls, it dies. The heron population in England and Wales fluctuates around 5,000 pairs. There have been annual counts of heron organised by the BTO since 1928, the longest continual survey of any wild bird in the world. We certainly count our herons. Most colonies average around 20 pairs, but the RSPB reserve at Northwood Hill in Kent has about 180 pairs, the largest in Britain. Well, down our side. The large conspicuous nests are generally grouped together conveniently in small areas, making counting easy. The only problem being those nests which appear no larger than a rook's. Most trees contain only one nest, but in China, 60 nests have been counted in one tree. Of course, the density of herons is greater in Asia, still fiendishly clever. The size of a heronry depends to a great extent on the richness of the adjacent feeding ground. Super eaters need supermarkets, and it explains the heron's preference for estuaries and lowland river valleys. Each heron has a favorite fishing spot. With only 2 of our family left, it's still the survival of the fittest. And the fittest is definitely Big Bill. Food is regurgitated for the young, and competition can be violent. There's a lot of grabbing of bills, and a great deal of heavy soliciting. And as usual, the squeaky wheel gets the most grease. Dad returns, Mum calls. It takes as much as 7 hours to collect a complete meal for the young, and in the 2-month nesting period, 230 pounds of food finds its way to the treetop. About 500 grams per nestling every 24 hours. A lot of bullying goes on, and there are records of the oldest actually eating the youngest. June. Many of the young take to standing on the edge of the nest. The parents, almost as though they can't bear to watch, spend less time at home. The young have the necessary habit of exercising before flight is possible for them. They scramble round the nest, and this is the time when many crash or get blown to their death. If the heron's flight looks slow, even lumbering, it's misleading. They're actually very good at it and can fly long distances at 30 miles an hour. They mostly feed within about 5 miles of the heronry, but some have been known to fly 40 miles. With the onset of warmer weather, aquatic animals move from deep to shallow water, and the stickleback and minnows grow big enough to eat, thus providing a good food supply for the young when they leave the nest. Here, Dad takes a small fish. Just practicing, perhaps. Nothing small for our Big Bill. This roach is typical of the size parents provide for their young. Seeing this go down, it's easy to understand that 230 pounds is swallowed in 2 months. Imagine 230 pounds of cod. Feel better? After eating, the nearly grown birds stretch themselves in the sun. Adults sun themselves too, exposing as much wing area as possible. Perhaps they get a sort of heron tan. Anglers, a funny lot. For 200 years, it was believed that certain oils extracted from dead herons possessed properties attractive to fish. Fishermen were told to anoint their bait with the marrow cut out of a heron's thigh bone, being of great temptation to fishes. The fact that there is no marrow in a heron's thigh bone makes the theory a trifle flimsy. The heron's foot was thought to exude an oil or scent attractive to fish. Some fisherfolk on the Faroes still carry a heron's foot for luck. It was also suggested that a wading heron wriggles and waggles its toes as a fishing aid. Fortunately for today's herons, anglers no longer covet their thigh bones, and as though in celebration, this heron demonstrates it needs no oils or scents, or toe waggling. After a period of 7 to 8 weeks from hatching, the young are on the point of leaving the nest. They clamber and flap around in the branches and are called, none too originally, branchers. Soon our young will have to fend for themselves. They've made it through the growing up dangers. Now they've got to face the outside world. After half a year of activity, the wood is quiet and still and empty. A hatchery and a heron. Our heron, Big Bill. Hatcheries don't like herons, which is funny because herons speak very highly of hatcheries. It's over the preservation of fish that the clash between man and heron occurs. If the heron would leave the fish alone, man would leave the heron alone. But then the heron wouldn't be a heron, and the man wouldn't be a man. So heron are regarded as vermin in trout fishing areas, and many are shot. Nevertheless, Bill has a go. Herons were once highly esteemed as food, even royal food. Nowadays we prefer rainbow trout, and Big Bill isn't arguing. The trouble is, they won't stay still. Rotters. Big Bill tries somewhere else. He's not yet very experienced. He's got a lot to learn. Every noise excites him. But every noise is not food. Not by a long leap. So he has to practice on something which holds still at any rate. Or maybe he's heard that old marrowbone story. Or the one about the African umbrella bird. The survival rate of young herons is not high. Big Bill has good ears, and he hears something. The fox is no enemy, but you can't be too careful. In fact, Bill's only enemy is man, and the things man does. Man disturbs the heron, and the heron doesn't like to be disturbed. In fact, not many fishermen like to be disturbed. creates pollution, and the heron comes in for the worst of it, being at the end of a food chain. If there's anything that can poison birds, the heron's got it. 20th century saying. Because of various poisons, herons can die, and they can't breed as well either. Ponds are removed, ditches drained, frogs, a source of food, are scarce. What self-respecting frog would live here? Fortunately, herons will eat almost anything, and Bill is now a year older and a year wiser. He eats fish up to 3 pounds in weight, crabs, prawns, small birds, grasshoppers, mice, mammals up to stoat size, coot, moorhen, lots of water voles, duck, rats, even cats, plus a little vegetation for pellet formation. But one of the heron's favorite foods is eel. Herons probably eat more eels than all other species of fish put together. Contrary to popular belief, it doesn't stab, it grabs. Herons have slight serrations on the edges of the mandibles, which give a firm hold. This is a pretty big eel, and singularly uncooperative. Heron's digestion is especially adapted to eels, because eels contain more fat than any other freshwater fish. They're also very slimy, and a heron's plumage condition is important. To remove the slime, they use a combination of powder down and a pectinated claw. That's a sort of comb with serrated edges on one of their toes. Herons usually kill their prey before swallowing it, but it doesn't look as though Bill's going to manage that this time. There is, in folklore, a story which says that eels eaten alive pass straight through the heron and out again. So they were said to stand with their hindquarters pressed against a rock to prevent this wastage of effort. Better back up, Bill. After that struggle, Bill pauses to remember the good old days when he was younger and meals were easier to come by. Goldfish in garden ponds provide an increasing supply of food. That is, for herons able to adapt to the idea of being close to man. Unfortunately for Bill, some people don't like having their goldfish eaten. Bill finds a quieter garden. If you really want to protect your goldfish, stretch a few thin wires around the edges of the pond. That's all. After the good times come the bad times. Severe weather kills herons, particularly the young. They're inexperienced and in competition with adult birds, and over half of them die the first winter. Continental herons migrate, but British ones generally stay, and this touch of the stiff upper mandible can lead to starvation if food is scarce. Bill needs only a pound of food a day, but that's something like 5 roach, or 14 eels, or 3 water voles, or 1.5 moorhens, and you know how tricky it is to find half a moorhen. There's just not enough food to go round. Britain's 25,000 herons need 25,000 pounds of food. That's nearly 12 tons, and that's every day. Of course, actual mortality depends on the severity and length of winter. In 1962-63, the population was cut almost in half. Over 10,000 herons dead. So, fishermen, if you're about to go for your guns, remember the heron has quite a lot to cope with as it is. For Bill, like all birds, finding a meal and a mate means the difference between life and death. Herons have been around for millions of years, and it's lucky for us that a few survived to return to their ancestral nesting sites to breed more little bills, to discomfort the eels, and to give us, albeit at a distance, their grey but colourful company.
Since the dawn of time, many animals have sought to protect their young and ensure their survival. Birds coped with the world's harsh, unrelenting environment by evolving the nest and indulging in a high degree of parental care. An important reason for such behavior was that birds are warm-blooded. Eggs need brooding at a constant temperature. From the moment they hatch, nestlings must have warmth and a constant supply of food. Most reptiles, however, don't need this care. They also put their eggs inside a shell, but it's not as hard as a bird's, although a great advance on the amphibian's unprotected jelly. Few reptiles show any brooding behavior or care of their young. They leave the eggs in some secluded spot to hatch by the heat of the sun. When reptiles evolved into birds, some 200 million years ago, the nest solved many of the birds' breeding problems. Today, nests are built in a bewildering array of shapes and sizes. High in the trees, like the greater spotted woodpecker, or almost submerged, like the little grebe's floating platform in the middle of a lake. Wherever they are found, nests, like the plumage and behavior of their owners, are perfectly adapted to their surroundings. The nightjar's nest is simple, just a flooring of leaves. The nests of other species are far more complex, the work of true craftsmen. One step up from the nightjar is the lapwing. It's a bird of the open field, and it needs a better nest than the nightjar to protect its eggs from the chilly winds of April when it begins nesting. At first, the lapwing's nest is no more than a scrape in the ground, scoured out by the bird's legs. The female does most of the work. But occasionally the lapwing stoops down and picks up sticks, stones, pieces of dead leaves, grass, and other debris, and then flicks them behind with a toss of its head. This action probably derives from the lapwing's feeding behavior. Inedible scraps are often rejected with the same sideways head flick. Here the movement has another purpose. Gradually, the pieces of leaves and grass build up around the brooding bird, forming the wall of a simple nest. Set safely inside this protective thatch, the eggs remain untouched by the wind, especially when covered by the parent's warm breast feathers. But cold is not the only problem for a nesting lapwing. Other animals can cause concern too. In this case, sheep. The female is unhappy. The sheep are coming her way. Their sharp hooves could cause serious damage to her eggs. She calls in alarm, but the sheep graze closer. She raises her wings in threat, trying to appear larger and more formidable to the sheep. Then she charges, distracting attention from the nest. The danger's over. A quick preen, a ruffle of her feathers, and she can return to her eggs. The owners of these eggs, common terns, don't have to worry about sheep. They nest on barren sand dunes and islands. What they do have to worry about is other terns. Competition for nesting sites is fierce. Each pair stake out a territory where they lay their 2 eggs. They defend the nest area vigorously against all comers. The nest construction is much the same as the lapwings, and the terns build it in an identical way, picking up grass pieces and flicking them over their bodies. Both sexes share incubation. They very rarely leave the eggs uncovered for long. Gulls and other predators would soon snap up the contents of any unguarded nest. While common terns protect their eggs by their physical presence, the shoveler duck is a master of the art of camouflage. This female is nervous on the approach to her nest. She won't go near until it's absolutely safe, and her senses tell her there's something close by in the reeds. She moves forward to investigate. It's just a lone redshank searching for food. The female relaxes. It's no real danger to her eggs. The shoveler's nest is hidden deep in a grass tussock close to the water's edge. The duck has added a new refinement to the gentle art of nest building: feather down. Only the female incubates the eggs. The shoveler drake is too brightly colored for nest duty. He stands guard over his mate. It's the female who supplies the warm, insulating down, plucking the feathers from her breast and making her nest as cozy as a continental quilt. Dried grasses pulled in with the beak still form the bulk of the nest. The shoveler also uses the living grass around its nest for aerial camouflage. The brown and white streaked pattern of the female breaks up her outline in the dappled light of the tussock. When she stops moving, she becomes invisible to all but the most alert predator. The swan could never adopt such a nesting strategy. It's one of the largest of our water birds, too big to hide. This is the male, or cob, recognized by the black bulbous knob on the top of his bill. The female, the pen, is on their almost completed nest. The swan doesn't even attempt to hide its nest. Instead, it seems to try to intimidate potential nest robbers by its sheer size. Though the nest is more than 100 times the size of the lapwing's nest, it is constructed in much the same way. This time there is a division of labor. While the female sits on the eggs, the male collects reeds and passes them behind him with the same twist of the head that the lapwing and tern used on their nests. The sitting bird collects the reeds and stacks them around herself with a similar movement, making the nest even more bulky. It needs to be. The swans must protect their eggs and insure against the risk of the water rising in the lake. The nest isn't always so large. Its size depends on the amount of material surrounding the nest area. In drier conditions, there would be less building material and the nest would be smaller. In wetlands like this, there's no lack of vegetation. The swan's instinct is to keep on collecting, so the nest just grows and grows. Though they're still building, 6 eggs have already been laid. The female incubates for about 38 days, only leaving the nest to feed. On such occasions, the male takes over her duties, but normally he waits nearby, watching out for danger. When they hatch, the young are fluffy balls of down. They stay on the nest for a day or two, and then follow their parents into the water for their first swim. From the beginning, the cygnets feed themselves, though the female does pull up water plants, crushing them slightly and leaving the cygnet's smaller beaks to do the rest. Both parents keep a close watch on their young, protecting them against disaster. Away from the water's edge lives a bird that nests neither on the ground nor on the water. Trees help to deter some predators, such as foxes and rats, but they're also dangerous. Here, wind is a problem. Eggs can be blown away. The nest is in the center of the picture. From below, the egg can be seen through the flimsy latticework of twigs. The nest belongs to that arch-enemy of the farmer, the wood pigeon. It's a pretty basic structure, an 8-inch dish of twigs and sticks, nestling in the fork of a branch. It's late July, and the bird's 2 eggs have just been laid. This is the female. She does about 3/4 of the incubation. The male does the day shift. He's on duty between 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. The nest itself seems quite fragile, but its appearance is deceptive. The twigs are firmly interwoven to form a robust, stable platform that can last for years. This is necessary because, unlike the swan, lapwing, and other birds which build simple nests, young wood pigeons are helpless when hatched and depend on their parents for food, warmth, and protection for almost a month. The parents sit on the eggs for 17 days, rarely leaving them unattended. Despite their care, many wood pigeon eggs are stolen by jays, magpies, and other predators such as squirrels. When the survivors finally hatch, they are fed by regurgitation on a unique diet, pigeon's milk. It's a cheese-like substance produced from cells in the parent's crop, an ideal food for the growing bird, rich in fats and proteins. The nestling requires lots of protein to develop, but the wood pigeons are vegetarian, and it's difficult to find enough vegetable protein in its diet. Pigeon's milk neatly bypasses this problem, giving the young a nutritious, high-protein diet during the first few days of life. Nine days after hatching, both parents are working full tilt to collect food and bring it to the nest. While the male waits, the female is busy regurgitating food to their growing offspring. The chick's beak irritates the lining of the adult's crop, triggering delivery of the partly digested meal. By now the menu is a porridge of pigeon's milk and corn seeds. Most wood pigeons time their nesting so that hatching coincides with the ripening cereal crop, one of the main reasons that farmers shoot wood pigeons on sight. Seven days later, and all the parents' hard work has paid off. The flight feathers are nearly fully developed, and the chick is almost ready to leave the nest. Its parents are now feeding their infant only once or twice a day. When the food finally turns up, the chick really lets its hunger show. Rearing young is thirsty work. The male stops off for a drink. While the parents forage for themselves, the chick, left to its own devices, begins to exercise its flight muscles on the edge of the nest. Watched by its parent, the fledgling moves out onto the branches, away from the soiled nest, now revealing the fate of its weaker brother. Even after it has left the nest, the young pigeon will be fed for some days by its parents. Gradually they'll withdraw their support, leaving the young bird to fend for itself. Until then, it can relax in the September sun. Rooks rarely relax, and never during the February breeding season. They also nest in trees, but higher up in the topmost branches. It's a very exposed position, windblown and blustery. The birds ride the swaying branches like sailors on a boat caught in the winter gales. Calling is an important part of a rook's courtship. Although rooks nest in colonies, rookeries of 9,000 nests are known, the birds are still very territorial. Pairs defend the small area around their nests and drive away any intruders. This couple are trying to squat on another pair's nest. They're soon seen off by the legitimate owners. The male is the true home builder. He supplies most of the twigs and sticks that make up the nest, and he also helps his mate with the building. Unlike the wood pigeon's flat platform of sticks, the rook builds up the side of its nest with scores of branches forming a deep cup shape, perfectly designed to keep the eggs from rolling out during squally weather. Often it's only necessary to refurbish the old nest by cleaning it out and adding a few branches. the female's decided to help with the twig collection. She jostles her mate aside, determined to make her lengthy offering fit into place. The completed nest is an ugly, bulky structure, firmly fastened to the swaying treetops. Inside there is a second nest, a lining of mud and straw, on which the female lays her 2 brown-spotted, bluish-green eggs. The male feeds the female as she incubates the eggs during the first days of spring. The chicks hatch as the world is waking up, in late March or early April, just when there is an abundant food supply. Father is still hard-pressed to produce the daily bread. He not only feeds the chicks, but also the female. She broods the chicks continuously for the first 10 days and expects feeding too. Sometimes she's a little too greedy. This portion's for the chick. Rooks will fly miles to find food. They eat almost anything. They take earthworms, leather jackets, and any sort of grub or larvae. They're also partial to cereals. The birds often forage together as a flock, but there's no cooperation among them. Once on the ground, all rules are off. It's every rook for himself. After the 10th day, the hen bird stops brooding the young, and both parents help to collect supplies and feed their offspring. By the time they're 6 weeks old, these chicks will be fully grown. Despite their increasing size, the young birds are held safely in the deep well of the nest. Even after they've left the nest, they're still dependent on the parents for up to 3 months. At about the same time that young rooks first take wing, another woodland bird, the bullfinch, has just begun to lay its eggs. Like the rooks, its nest is really 2 nests in one, a twig exterior and a delicately built inner nest woven from fine roots and hairs. The female bullfinch looks like a toned-down version of the male, but it's she who builds the double nest and does the lion's share of incubation. No one is quite sure why the bullfinch makes this double nest. It would certainly be far less trouble to build only a single layer. The bird nesting at the top of this Scots pine does just that. The chaffinch has dispensed with the bulky outer nest. By investing less energy in nest building, they can put more effort into raising a family. Moss, lichens, grass and feathers make a delicate cup wedged firmly among the branches. Cobwebs bind the building materials together, giving flexible walls that fit snugly around the eager chicks, keeping them warm. But a small nest has its disadvantages. As the chicks grow, they can easily fall from the tree, especially when they begin to practice flying. The blue tit has avoided this danger by nesting in tree holes. Unable to climb to the entrance, the infant birds stand little chance of falling from the nest. For the first few days, they are mainly fed small caterpillars. The nest is a simple cup made of moss and grass. It holds the chicks comfortably at first, but by the time they are ready to leave, they have outgrown the nest and crushed it underfoot. A tree hole is tailor-made for a cup nest, but one of the least promising habitats must be the long, thin stems of a reed bed. One bird that has overcome this difficulty is the reed warbler. It builds its nest around the upright stems of growing reeds. The nest is still the basic cup shape, though much deeper. The scaffolding that supports it can be tossed about by the wind, So the bird needs this soft cubbyhole to protect its eggs and young. 3 or 4 chicks is the usual size of clutch. Their diet, like that of the adult reed warbler, is insects, plentiful in a watery habitat. The chick's tail wagging signals imminent defecation. The parent collects the fecal sac and prevents the nest being soiled. The adults must always be on the alert. With such an open-topped, exposed nest, even an ordinary summer storm could flood the inside in minutes, killing the nestling from exposure. Brooding is essential. The house martin has no such worries. It also makes a cup nest, catching small straws and grass stems on the wind and working them into pellets with mud. This attractive bird has learned to build its home under the eaves of houses, where rain is not a threat. The nest takes shape as pellets of mud and straw are piled laboriously one on top of the other, like miniature bricks. Both male and female house martins work tirelessly to complete the nest. The birds have to carry more than 6 times their own body weight of mud. It's been estimated that they must make at least 400 collecting trips before the nest is finished, and egg laying can take place. After an incubation of 14 days, the young hatch. They are fed a puree of insects caught by their parents on the wing. Mortality is low among the chicks, mainly because of the nest location. They are relatively safe in their tiny castle of clay. The magpie has a different way of deterring predators. At first it builds a rook-type nest, the male bringing the raw materials to the nest site and the female arranging them. Then, over the top of the nest, the birds fasten an open-work dome of sticks, so that from a distance, it looks very like a squirrel's dray. The roof of twigs is thought to act as a defensive screen, protecting the eggs and chicks from the unwelcome attentions of marauding jays and other nest robbers. It certainly looks effective. So it's strange that in many parts of the country, most magpies no longer build the twig roof. It may be that predators are not now as common as in former times, and building the dome shield is an unnecessary waste of energy. Magpies usually lay between 5 and 8 eggs, but in this case, only 2 have hatched. A tiny bird that builds probably the most beautiful of all British nests provides the perfect contrast to the sprawling, untidy home of the magpie. Broad-leaved woodland is the home of Britain's very own master builder, the long-tailed tit. Its small nest, just 6 inches long, is as functional as it is beautiful. The bulk of the nest is made of moss, held together with spiders' webs, giving it an uncanny ability to be pulled and stretched out of all proportion without tearing. The long-tailed tit spends a great deal of time nest building. This pair are just adding the finishing touches to a job that has taken them 20 days to complete. The birds cover the inside of the nest with insulating feathers. More than 2,000 have been found in a single nest. The outside is given a coat of lichen pieces, held on with extra cobwebs. The lichen makes for extremely efficient camouflage among the woodland trees. Even so, More than 80% of all long-tailed tit nests are destroyed by predators before the young fledge. To see an even grander exhibition of avian homemaking, we must fly south to the reed beds of Italy and Spain and search among the stands of willow and poplar. This is the home of the penduline tit, a bird that makes arguably the finest built nest in all Europe. The stirrup-shaped swing is just the start. The female flies off. She takes very little part in nest construction, preferring instead to feed, building up her reserves for egg-laying and leaving the male to do the donkey work. A very important part of the cockbird's job is to collect long strips of plant material and to bind it round the place where the nest and the supporting branch meet. This is absolutely vital to the whole structure. If this point is weak, the nest will come adrift, with disastrous results for the eggs or chicks within. It's no wonder the male spends so much time on this part of the job. As the walls are built on and the nest becomes heavier, the male adds further strengthening to the weak point. Soon the main body of the nest is complete. The tough, spongy walls are composed almost entirely of plant down, mainly from willow and poplar, intermixed with seed cases and fibers. When it's nearing completion, the male adds his final female luring touch. He collects any soft material he can find, like these willow seed hairs, and carries them back to the nest. He wallpapers the nest with the warm, soft fibers, making, he hopes, an irresistible home for his mate. It all sounds very romantic. The male seems the perfect husband. But as soon as his wife is safely settled in the completed nest, the male deserts her and begins building afresh for another lady love. Dawn on the East African plains. It's a land of scrub, thorn bushes and grassland, and it's dominated by the sun. The sun always shines. Temperatures rarely fall below 21 degrees centigrade even in winter. Most of the time, the trees and grasses are starved of water, in a state of semi-drought. Many creatures have adapted themselves to this harsh environment. African wildlife is so well known that it's easy to forget just how unusual a beast the giraffe really is. Its long neck and 18-inch tongue allow the giraffe to exploit heights that no other herbivore can reach. Native cattle must get their living at ground level. One bird has learned to profit from their lifestyle. The cattle egret snaps up insects that are flushed from the grass by their hooves. The oxpecker uses cattle too. It feeds on the fleas and ticks that plague the big beasts. Both benefit from this arrangement. The cattle lose a lot of parasites, and the oxpecker gets a free meal. And a free ride. Another group of birds, the weavers, have adapted to the African environment by changing their nest-building habits. It's this group that have evolved into the master builders of the bird world. Weaver birds always build in trees and always in colonies, like these red-headed weaver nests. The buffalo weaver takes this social habit to extremes. It builds apartment blocks, massive communal nests of thorn twigs with many individual compartments, each containing a nest. These nests are empty. Building starts with the coming of the rains and the first glimmer of green grass on the parched earth. The rains also mean a superabundance of seeds from the newly sprouting grass. It's an ideal time for a seed eater like the white-browed sparrow weaver to mate and raise a family. Twigs and small leaves make up the raw materials for the white-browed sparrow weaver's untidy nest. As with most East African weaver birds, the male is responsible for building the main bulk of the nest. The rainy season is also a nesting signal for the vitelline masked weaver. This species builds on the extreme tip of a thin branch. It's a defense against predators such as snakes or monkeys. They'd be hard put to reach the weaver's eggs in such an exposed position. One weaver species even plants thorns on the outside of its nest to deter egg thieves. The golden palm weaver, as its name suggests, makes its home on the tips of palm branches. Once he's finished building, the male displays on a nearby stem in the hope of attracting a mate. Often living next to the golden palm weaver, and usually close to human habitation, is the handsome black-headed weaver. This species uses grass strips to make its nest. The male, once again, is the builder. He collects the strips by tearing them from the living plant with his beak. He makes a tear at the base of the leaf he's chosen, then pulls upwards until the strip comes away. The green strips are far more supple than dead, sun-dried leaves that would crack as soon as they were bent or twisted. They make the job of weaving the nest much easier. When he's collected enough strips, the male flies back with them to the nest site. In eastern Kenya, a subspecies of the black-headed weaver lives cheek by jowl with humans, sometimes right in the center of a native village. It's a very prolific species with hundreds of nests in a single tree. Such colonies help reduce predation of the young. There's another advantage. The more nests in a colony, the more females will be attracted to it. Such crowding puts enormous pressure on individual males to find a mate. They're all competing against one another. The first step is to find a likely-looking nest site on the colony's tree. Not just anywhere will do. The trouble is, very often another male finds it just as attractive. In confrontations such as this, one of the rivals usually gives up quite quickly. But occasionally they're so well matched that a real battle royal is inevitable. The victor will take possession and then set out to begin his nest building. Palm fronds are especially attractive. The birds use the same stripping technique as the black-headed weaver, tearing the leaf strips from base to tip, though not without trouble from their neighbors. To start the nest, the male takes a single strand and weaves it around the fork of a branch. It's hard to believe that no learning is required for this intricate operation, yet all the complex behavior is wired into the bird's head from birth. He's watched by several females. They take no part in the nest building at this stage. They don't even seem interested in the cockbird's efforts. The connecting grass strip is very important. It defines the size of the nest, and when reinforced will be useful as a perch for further work. Hundreds of palm leaves must be destroyed during the breeding season to supply enough greenery for the whole colony. Each complete nest needs more than 500 leaf strips. Sometimes other vegetation is used. Our male has brought a leafy twiglet to add to the nest. All around him, other males are toiling to complete their own nests. The female seems interested, and all the nearby male weavers start to display, vying for the hen bird's attention. Our male joins in. Then he stops. Perhaps he realizes he stands no chance with the ladies until his own nest is complete. The only answer is to work even harder. But he is luckier than some. In the colony there are nests in every stage of completion. This bird is a late starter. He's just attaching the first thread. Others are far more advanced and have the roof of their nest built, but not the floor. It takes our male a further 3 days to reach this stage. He'll be working for at least another 4 to complete the nest. Every so often he lies back, as if to admire his handiwork and to see what else needs to be done. It has been suggested that it was by watching weaver birds in action that primitive man thought of basket work. It's easy to see why. The bird really does weave its nest, passing the long strips over and under just as a human weaves a basket. Another female. This one seems more attentive. Our male begins a low-intensity display, calling, flapping his wings. Other males follow suit, even when they do not have a nest. He adds the finishing touches to his handiwork. Then he lets fly with a high-intensity display, pulling out all the stops to attract the female's attention. She's chased by another cockbird, and her intended becomes almost hysterical, throwing himself about on the underside of his nest. The reason's simple. She has landed very close. He has to entice her onto the nest with his display, but all the activity among the neighbors distracts her attention. He can hardly contain his mounting excitement. But she's not interested, or is she? A quick examination of the interior of the nest from the outside. Then the female crosses the threshold, accepting the nest and our male as her partner. Once this part of the ritual is completed, the female sets off to honor her side of the marriage contract. It's her job to collect the fine cotton-like grass and reed seeds that will be used to line the interior of the nest. The female has complete control of the interior decor. The male takes a back seat during this stage of nest building. Occasionally, a piece of mud is taken in with the lining. Some tribes believe that the weaver bird uses it as a sort of candlestick, fixing a firefly to the mud and using the insect to light the interior of the nest at night. Once the lining is complete, the female will lay 2 eggs. As with the penduline tit, the male weaver leaves the upbringing of the chicks solely to the female. If they survive, next year the young will take their place at this convention of master builders. If the weaver is the master builder of the bird world, then this pure white seabird is its master balancer. The Seychelles, an archipelago of 28 small islands, 5 degrees south of the equator and more than 700 miles from the coast of East Africa. The bird is a fairy tern, a rare species found only on a few islands in the tropical waters of the Indian, Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The most remarkable thing about the fairy tern is its nest, or rather, the absence of a nest. This is the fairy tern's nest. If you think there's nothing there, you're quite right. The branch is completely bare. There's nothing on it but a bird. And an egg, rather spherical in shape, and balanced precariously in a shallow depression on the branch. The sitting bird is very tame. It will allow humans to approach and even touch it. There's a good reason for this. It's far too dangerous to leave the egg alone for long. Apart from predators, a simple gust of wind could easily dislodge it. The brooding bird is condemned to sit it out. A quick scratch is all that's allowed. The sitter anxiously scans the sky. Its mate is out at sea, diving in the rich coastal waters for fish, the fairy tern's staple diet. The chick, when it hatches, is always fed whole fish. The parents accurately judge the size required so that the meal is never too big. A neighboring bird waits patiently, swaying gently in the soft tropical breeze as she incubates her single egg, delicately poised some 20 feet above the ground. As it grows, the chick is brought a larger fish. This one looks too large. It would be wrong to think that the fairy tern is in some way worse off than the weaver birds. In a way, we've come full circle. Weavers evolved their fine nest to protect their young from the many African predators. The fairy tern has less of a problem. It would be foolish to build an elaborate nest when it can deter its enemies by merely sitting continuously on a single egg. It may never be a master builder, but then it doesn't need to be.